Yes, yes.
Page 16,
Then
second paragraph.
16 second paragraph.
Yes.
Also, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Sorry. Also, new and important in the highest degree is the analysis of Marx gives in volume 2 of Capital of the reproduction aggregate social capital. Here too, Marx deals not with an individual phenomena, but with a mass phenomena, not with a fractional part of the economy of society, but with that economy as a whole. Correcting the aforementioned error of the classical economists, Marx divides the whole of social production into two big sections. One, production of the means of production, and two, production of article of a consumption, and examines in detail with the numerical examples the circulation of the aggregate social capital, both when reproduced in its former dimension and in the case of accumulation. Volume 3 of Capital solved the problem of how the average rate of profit is formed on the basis of the law of value. This immense stride forward made by economic science in the person of Marx consists in his having conducted an analysis from the standpoint of mass economic phenomena of the social economy as a whole, not from the standpoint of mass economic phenomena of the social economy as a whole, not from, sorry, I repeated, not from the standpoint of individual cases or of the external and the superficial aspects of a competition to which vulgar political economy and the modern theory of marginal utility, that is, frequently restrict themselves. Marx first analyzes the origin of surplus value and then goes on to consider its division into profit, interest, and ground rent. Profit is a ratio between surplus value and the total capital invested in an undertaking. Capital with a high organic composition, that is, with the preponderance of a constant capital over variable capital in excess of a social average. That is, capital with a high organic composition yields a rate of profit below the average. Capital with a low organic composition yields a rate of profit above the average. Competition among capitalists and the freedom to transfer their capital from one branch to another will in both cases reduce the rate of profit to the average. The sum total of the values of all the commodities in a given society coincides with the sum total of the prices of the commodities. But in individual undertakings and branches of production, as a result of competition, commodities are sold not at their values, at the prices of production, which are equal to the capital expended plus average profits. In this way, the well-known and indisputable fact of the divergence between prices and values and of the equalization of profit is fully explained by Marx on the basis of law of value, since the sum total of values of all commodities coincide with the sum total of prices. However, the equating of value to prices does not take place simply and directly, but in a very complex way. It is quite natural that in a society of a separate producers of commodities who are united only by the market, a conformity to law can be only an average social mass manifestation with individual deviations in either direction, mutually compensating one another. Okay, sir?
Okay,
Thank
okay.
you.
Yeah, thank you. Comrade Shivakumar, can you explain this?
Yeah, okay, I will try. So here again, we are in two paragraphs. We are looking at the second volume of Capital, the whole book, and a large section of the third volume, maybe about 80% of third volume. We have seen in Lenin again. I think only Lenin could do this. But he has summed it up very succinctly and without losing any important point. Okay, so we have looked at how what is value. Value is social labor. Social labor, average social labor needed to produce a commodity is the value of the commodity. That value is represented by money, and money is transformed into capital. Capital extracts surplus value from the worker in the production process. We have looked at all those. The relative surplus value and absolute surplus value. That's lengthening of working day, and also modernizing the production and increasing productivity so that the relative surplus value increases. That we have seen. Then we also saw how the accumulation takes place. The capitalists take the surplus value, they expand their production, there is a lot of competition, and there is accumulation, concentration, and centralization. We also looked at primitive accumulation. So all these make up the first volume of Capital. So the first volume is a base, sums up the scientific approach, scientific aspect of capitalist mode of production as revealed by Karl Marx. So we are looking at the basics, the relation between human beings or people in the society is a study, is a subject matter of economics. So what is the relation? Now there is a social division of labor and a immense social division of labor. Not only within the country, it's a global division of labor. Everyone does a part of their labor, and the whole collective production moves on. It's regulated and controlled by market. How it is regulated and controlled by market, we are coming to the second and third volume. First volume, we just assume that the commodities are sold and bought, capitalists are able to consume, or they want to expand their production, they are able to do that. But it's not automatic. There are a lot of conditions, a lot of mechanism is involved. So in second volume, what we are looking at is, apart from Marx, Lenin is giving the third part of second volume. Marx deals with the cost of circulation, cost of storage, transport, and he also looks at the turnover of capital. Some capital will turn over once in a year. Some will turn over probably 30, 40 times a year. Some will turn over 3 years, once in 2-3 years. So all those aspects is dealt with. But very important part is the third part. How does it happen? There are thousands and thousands of capitalists in this companies of different sectors. They are producing privately. So each one make their own plan. Each one make their own plan. What raw material to purchase, from where to purchase, how much to produce, how much to sell in the market. But they cannot do everything on their own. Assuming the capitalist production is completely established, all sectors are under capitalist production. So they need to buy whatever raw material they need, they will buy from the market. That means fellow capitalists, from other capitalists. Let's say if you are taking the spinning mill, the spinning mill owner or the capitalist who is operating spinning mill, the raw material has to come from the farmer, the cotton farmer. So the cotton has to be bought from the market. Cotton should be there in the market. That is an issue. So nobody can compel the cotton grower that you should produce cotton and bring it to market so that spinning mill can run. So he has his own plan, their own private mode of planning and producing. Similarly, machinery is to be bought, and labor power. Labor power also should be available in the market. And when the capitalist pays wages in the form of money to the worker, workers should find commodities for their subsistence, means of subsistence like food and clothing, transport, entertainment, all those stuff, whatever working class consumes, that should be also available in the market. Not only that, they even capitalists consume. So they need to, the capitalist consumption articles also should be available in the market, whatever we have discussed in the first volume. So all these are necessary. Without that, that cannot happen. The capitalist accumulation, surplus extraction, selling in the market. So here the capitalist is producing yarn and bringing to the market and selling in the market. Someone has to buy the yarn. So this is it's a huge network. Each capitalist linked with 2, 3 or production. They are buying and selling, and each one is planning and executing their plan independently, and also some form of relationships are there. Buyers, sellers, they place orders, but the whole thing is regulated in the market. So how it is regulated? How do you study that? What are the contradictions? What are the weak points? What are the points where the weak spot, where there'll be chances of failure? So how do you study scientifically? So before Marx also people tried, but Marx invented these two departments. He divides the whole capitalist mode of production into two big sections. One is production of the means of production. That is raw material, machinery, equipments, whatever the products which go into capitalist manufacturing or their operation, which is not for individual consumption. So that will be like what we explained, the constant capital part of the capital invested. Like in our specific example, it's for buying cotton and other auxiliary material, and also the machinery. This is the first department, department 1. Department 2 is production of articles of consumption. We already saw the workers need articles to be consumed, because the worker is doing only spinning work. So someone has to produce food, someone has to produce clothing, so that worker can use some money he received as wages and buy from the market. So that is produced. All the companies, all the capitalists producing articles of consumption, they are grouped under section 2 or department 2. So Marx studies in detail how this reproduction can take place. Department 2 also, there is constant capital, variable capital, and surplus value. There are capitalists and workers in both the departments. So there you have 6 components each, and how they interact. So Marx takes numerical examples. It's like more like a modeling, how the exchange takes place. No super authority sits at the top and regulates. We saw in the example of Reliance, they go for a centralization, backward and forward integration, and they also have other sectors they are bringing in. Maybe they may have coordination between this sector, but overall the economy as a whole, this is regulated by exchange, individual exchanges between capitalist producers. How it happens? There are very multiple complexities. You have one part of capital, machinery, so that doesn't get consumed every production cycle. It lasts for multiple production cycles. For example, if you buy a machinery, it will run for 10 years. On the other hand, when you buy cotton, it will be consumed entirely in this production cycle itself. So how the value and the money part, how it circulates, and the surplus value, all these issues, Marx studies very diligently, and he teases out the issues and the aspects of what is happening, what are the points, and what conditions should be fulfilled. So this is not, but this is not regulated by anyone. This is done through the market forces. There is an inherent tendency for these to lead to imbalances and That also one of the reasons for crisis. We saw overproduction, one of the reasons in the first volume. Here we are saying imbalance. There is volume number 2. And after Marx, I think there are some economists, even in the capitalist bourgeois economists, they have taken up study of this and they have input-output table and all, which was discussed and used during the 20th century. I think nowadays, what is the use? I'm not aware of it. So now it is more of everything will be done by market and capitalist, corporate, huge corporates regulate, and they have their monopoly capital and all. So this is second volume. Volume 3. So now we looked at, when Rajan was explaining, we say, we leave alone profit. Let us look at value. So we looked at how value is produced by labor, how surplus value is produced for the capital by the worker working more than necessary labor time. So they are all value. But in market, we don't, the commodities are sold and bought for prices. And capitalists earn profit. We know very well, we take any company, they will have a profit and loss statement. They will have a profit rate, return on investment. So they don't talk about value. So there is what is the relation between value produced in production and the prices realized in market, and how prices fluctuate around value, and how prices of production is a basis for capitalist exchange. So as far as capitalist is concerned, the capitalist invested the capital. The constant part and the variable part is the money the capitalist had advanced. The surplus value came from the worker. It's totally free in a sense. It's really free for the capitalist. So when the capitalists work in the market, they don't exchange based on value. It is more based on the prices of production. Prices of production is capitalist advanced plus the average rate of profit. So how the average rate of profit is established? By competition among capital within the same sector, and also capital moving from one sector to the other. When in one industry there is the profit rate is high, the other capitalists will now, instead of investing in their own industry, they will take the capital and come into this. Recently, we have seen the example of last 20 years. IT in India, IT outsourcing industry was growing very fast. So initially, Infosys and the small companies came up. Then Tata Group came, TCS. Then Wipro, who was selling vegetable oils, they also came into this. Then L&T, they are later entrants. L&T, Mahindra. L&T is an engineering company. So when the rate of profit is more in IT outsourcing services, so L&T starts L&T Infotech. Mahindra, we know they make automobiles. So they also come into that. So they like this is one instance. So there is a movement of capital between the sectors. Like Lenin is saying, this is very, very complex and complex phenomena, but which does take place by competition and initiative and entrepreneurship and of different capitalists. So, but bourgeois economy, after capital, what happens? Today, what is taught in universities and the schools by the mainstream. So that is based on theory of marginal utility. It doesn't talk about labor and value. It goes to the other side. What price a product is sold? It's sold at the marginal utility. What is a utility derived by the consumer by the last unit of from the last unit of the product? Like I'm buying, let's say I'm buying tomatoes. So how many kgs I will buy? 1 kg, 2 kg, 3 kg. So each kg, if we take the marginal unit, we say I will equate the marginal utility to the price and I will buy that many kilos. Similarly, I am going to use the marginal utility, the consumer, to use all my money to purchase the needed things. So the total utility, the consumers maximize total utility. Not only in individual consumption, even in production, He talks about marginal utility of capital and marginal utility of labor. The big problem with marginal utility theory is it's any science or any rational or scientific theory should have measurable quantities. So labor, you can measure how many hours it's spent. How do you measure utility? How do you measure utility of a kg of tomato to a consumer? So it's a subjective concept. It doesn't have any objective measurable output. So that is one major problem. But they have it's convenient and convenient for the capitalist system, not asking very uncomfortable questions, exploitation, crisis, and all those are pushed behind the scene. So they are looking at only individual capital and what is the marginal utility of a production plan, what is the marginal utility of the individual consumer. You can read. There are hundreds and thousands of universities teaching. There are studies. They're all doing that. I was teaching one student. We were discussing and trying to learn the economic textbook. A lot of work going into that, but the scientific value is very, very, very weak there. So they are not able to explain when the 2008 crisis comes. They are all stuck. So how do you explain? Even today, the economic science, the bourgeois economic science has not come out of that crisis. They don't have a theory of how the system works. So which has been going on for, okay, the economy can go into crisis, but the whole economic science goes into crisis. So because of this, their vulgar political economy, they're superficial. They are looking at only external and superficial aspects. They restrict themselves to limited scope. So Marx, we have seen, like he goes to surplus value, from where it comes and how it is divided into profit. That also he goes into that. The profit goes to the industrial capitalist, also to the merchant, people who are doing in the distribution, retail merchant and distributors. And it goes, one part of it goes to as interest to the bankers and now you can the financial industry, you have stock market and the credit, the securities market, and one portion goes to the state as tax revenue. So all this tax revenue Marx is not going into, but he is looking at profit, interest, and ground rent. Third volume, we look at it. So the profit is the surplus value and the total capital. So we already saw that in the total capital, the ratio of constant capital keeps going up, and the ratio of value variable capital coming down. If you take a particular sector, it will start with probably, if you take very constant capital to variable capital ratio is 2:1, 2 constant and 1 variable capital. As the industry evolves and more production revolutionizing the production, mechanization, automation, the constant capital proportion will keep going up. But let's say it goes to 10:1. But we from our analysis, we know the value is produced by, new value is produced only by the variable capital paid to the worker. Worker produce new value and the surplus value. So the constant part doesn't give surplus value. It just gives you the already existing value. It transfers to the product. So this leads to decreasing rate of profit. So when you have the organic composition, as Marx calls it, that means the constant part of capital keeps increasing, the variable capital keeps decreasing. So you have a high organic composition. So the surplus value accumulated tend to go down. It's not absolute. Marx says it is a tendency of the rate of profit to decrease. It's only a tendency. There are counteracting influences. Okay, so this also Marx is studying, and that is a core of capitalist crisis. We have overproduction, we have disproportionality, but when you have profit rate going down, the capitalist has surplus value, but they don't want to reinvest. Only when will they invest? When they have profitability is good. Only then the capitalist will invest. So if the profitability is going down in one sector, they will look for new sectors to invest. Or if in one country the profit rate is going down, they will try to look at new places to invest. So this way capitalist goes into it becomes an international system also, which we have seen in the previous paragraph. So this competition of capitalists reduces the rate of profit, but there's sum total of all values, we have seen that prices deviate from values. When you look at individual transaction, it's not based on value because it's a capitalist exchange, not commodity exchange, but it's capitalist exchange. So it takes place based on prices of production. But if you look at the society as a whole, if you add all the prices of production, which is exchanged in the market, and that will be equal to the total value produced in the capitalist society. So this also this also operates through the market. Private players, everyone is planning and executing their own plan with some sort of coordination, but overall sort of anarchy prevails in the market. But the market goes on with all these crises and overproduction and we say disproportionality and the investment slowing down. One good example is towards the end of 2019 in India, many of the automobile companies they had to stop production, and capitalists are not investing. Everyone wants to keep the surplus value and put it in the stock market or stock market or in the financial market. So then who will produce? So if the surplus value is reinvested, then that goes as wages, and also that generates demand for the capital goods, or means of production. So that is one major weak point of capitalist system as a whole. So this way, in third volume, Marx explains the divergence between prices and values and equalization of profit. They are all empirical facts which was observed in the 19th century itself. Marx was able to explain a complete theory without any internal contradiction, on the logical contradiction, on the law based on the law of value. So equating the social value to individual prices does not take place simply and directly. It's not. We cannot take one transaction. You say how it is going to operate. Maybe we can work through it, but it's a very complex way. And the separate producers of commodities, they are united only by the market. The market unites them. Otherwise, they are free to do. The legal system and the system of property relation doesn't interfere from what they do, whether they are recruiting people or they are laying off people. Okay, there are laws, and which laws are changed and all, and how much, whether they are expanding production or they want to shut down a plant. So all these things, individual capitalists, they take a decision on their own. So when the huge number of operators are united only through the market, so this law will work on an average social mass manifestation. Like in physics, we have the statistical laws. So when you look at capitalist society, it follows a law, but this law is a macro level law. Micro level, it deviates. But at the macro level, the law operates. So the individual deviations mutually compensate. Then you have so that you can, but you can understand, you can bring out on what basis the capitalist mode of production operates. Like how it is exchanged and how profit is derived, what is a merchant's profit, how the banker's profit comes from, how the financial market operates. So all that money has to come from the production. The production only yields surplus value. Like sectors like transport, they are also extension of production. Transport and storage of commodities, even though they are not taking place on the shop floor, they are extents of production. But there are many other activities which don't add value to the commodity. So all those operations, they get profit, or they get money from this surplus value produced in the productive sector of the capitalist economy. So this is investigated, studied, and presented elaborately by Marx. He has completed the complete study and finalized the first volume. Second volume and third volume, he had written first and second draft. So it was not made ready for publication. So there might be some difficulty in reading that, but it's a complete work. That's what we understood by reading the three volumes and the fourth volume, the theories of surplus value. Marx has given a complete picture of capitalist mode of production, how the capitalist society operates, and we can extrapolate, we can develop, and the new aspects we can add today and understand. From after there are 150 years have passed, so some new aspects would have come in, but the essential core and the essence is revealed and documented in Das Kapital. So this is what I would like to share and conclude here.
Okay, thanks, comrade. Anybody has any questions?
I think that capitalist mode of production is full of complexities and confusion. So out of which only a few people are that is churning out of it. Few people only takes away the cream, and others are left dry. Is it? So the system, social capitalist mode of production, is benefited only a few, but depriving majority of the people. So it is an injustice. It is not justified mode of production. Is it now?
Yes, comrade.
Then we'll be able to explain better. But compared to the previous mode of production, this is a huge leap for the mankind. You know, the science and technology and productivity, the scale of production, socialization of production, all that is achieved by capital. But as you rightly point out, this is not the best or the ideal system. Mankind has to move forward, and we will go into more rational and more human-oriented mode of production instead of profit-oriented mode of production. That is in the future. There are some experiments we know in 20th century, Soviet Union, China. So we are going through that phase. But as of now, we are struggling with capitalist mode of production, and we need to understand how it operates, and so that we can transcend and transform this to the next mode of production, which will be done by collective effort of working class. That's what Marxism identifies. It's not by a few individuals. It's a social movement, a social process.
So the mode of production has to be in the hands of the state, so that it is easy to regulate. Is it so?
Yeah, then the question of nature of state comes in. So a state, so it means socially regulated production, distribution, and consumption. So whether it's done by state or what is the form of state, these are all topics, political topics debated widely and even implemented in practice. And what are the contradictions? What are the setbacks? What happened to Soviet Union? What happened in Soviet Union? What are the achievements and what are the setbacks, and what is happening in China, in Cuba. So these are the cases in Vietnam. Vietnam also, they have a social control through the state. Have we found out the perfect solution to moving ahead of capitalism? It's not. It's in the process of, we are doing it, we are going through the process. And then the next section, the next few paragraphs, which talks about land rent. So that is also a very important part. And that throws up other contradictions in the capitalist system and what will be the challenges ahead.
Okay, thanks, comrade. Anyone has any more questions? If not, now we'll move forward. Okay. Naresh, will you be able to read the next two paragraphs?
Okay, comrade.
Okay.
Uh, a rise in the productivity of labor implies a more rapid growth of constant capital as compared with variable capital. In as much as surplus value is a function of variable capital alone, it is obvious that the rate of profit, the ratio of surplus to the whole capital, not to its variable part alone, tends to fall. Marx makes a detailed analysis of this tendency and of a number of circumstances that conceal or counteract it. Without pausing to deal with the extremely interesting sections of Volume 3 of Capital, Volume 1 devoted to usurious capital, commercial capital, and money capital, we must pass on to the most important section, the theory of ground rent. Since the area of land is limited, and in capitalist countries the land is all held by individual private owners, the price of production of agriculture product is determined by the cost of productions, not on soil of average quality, but on the worst soil. Not under average conditions, but under the worst conditions of delivery of produce to the market. The difference between this price and the price of production on better soil or in better condition constitute differential rent. Analyzing this in detail and showing how it arises out of the difference in fertility of different plots of land and out of the difference in the amount of capital invested in land. Marx fully reveals. See also theories of surplus value, in which the criticism of Rodbertus is most noteworthy. The error of Ricardo, who considered that differential rent is derived only when there is a successive transition from better land to worse. On the contrary, there may be inverse transitions. Land may pass from one category into others, owing to advances in agriculture techniques, the growth of towns, and so on. And the notorious law of diminishing returns, which changes nature with the defects, limitations, and contradictions of capitalism, is profoundly erroneous. Further, the equalization of profit in all branches of industry and the national economy in general presupposes complete freedom of competition and the free flow of capital from one branch to another. However, the private ownership of land creates monopoly, which hinders that free flow. Because of that monopoly, the products of agriculture, where a lower organic composition of capital obtains, and consequently an individually higher rate of profit, do not enter into the quite free process of the equalization of the rate of profit. As a monopolist, the landowner can keep the price above the average, and this monopoly gives rise to absolute rent. Differential rent cannot be done away with under capitalism, but an absolute rent can. For instance, by the nationalization of the land, by making it state property, that would undermine the monopoly of private landowners and would mean the sole consistent and full operation of freedom of competition in agriculture. That is why, as Marx points out, bourgeois radicals have again and again in the course of history advanced this progressive bourgeois demand for nationalization of the land, a demand which, however, frightens most of the bourgeois because it would too closely affect another monopoly, one that is particularly important and sensitive today, the monopoly of the means of production in general. A remarkably popular, concise, and clear exposition of this theory of the average rate of profit on capital and of absolute ground rent is given by Marx himself in a letter to Engels dated August 1862. With reference to the history of ground rent, with reference to the history of ground rent, it is also important to note Marx analysis showing how labor rent, the peasant creates surplus product by working on the lord's land, is transformed into rent paid in produce or in kind. The peasant creates surplus product by working on the lord's land, is transformed into rent paid in produce or in kind. The peasant creates surplus product by working on the lord's land, is transformed into rent paid in produce or in kind. The peasant creates surplus product by working on the lord's land, is transformed into rent paid in produce or in kind. The peasant creates surplus product by working on the lord's land, is transformed into rent paid in produce or in kind. The peasant creates surplus product on its own land and hand it over to the landlord because of non-economic constraint. Then into money rent, rent in kind, which is converted into money. The overall of rolled old Russia as a result of the development of commodity production, and finally into capitalist rent. When the peasant is replaced by the agriculture entrepreneur who cultivates the soil with the help of hired labor, in connection with this analysis of the genesis of capitalist ground rent, note should be taken of a number of profound ideas of particular importance to backward countries like Russia, expressed by Marx regarding the evolution of capitalism in agriculture.
Okay. I think this is again continuing, but Shivakumar comrade, how to move forward?
I would suggest, we can read to the end of this section, and maybe we can discuss some of it today, and we can continue the discussion next week. It's 1.5 pages more. That is my suggestion. You see.
Okay. Then what I will do is I'll continue the reading, okay, up to the end. Then probably we'll take it up if time permits today something or in the next session. Okay. Okay. The transformation of rent in kind into money rent is furthermore not only inevitably accompanied but even anticipated by the formation of a class of propertyless day laborers who hire themselves out for money. During their genesis, when this new class appears but sporadically, the custom necessarily develops among the more prosperous peasants subject to rent payments of exploiting agricultural wage laborers for their own account, much as in feudal times, when the more well-to-do peasant serfs themselves also held serfs. In this way, they gradually acquire the possibility of accumulating a certain amount of wealth and themselves becoming transformed into future capitalists. The old self-employed possessors of land themselves just give rise to a nursery school for capitalist tenants whose development is conditioned by the general development of capitalist production beyond the bounds of the countryside. The expropriation and eviction of a part of the agricultural population not only set free for industrial capital the laborers, their means of subsistence and material for labor, it also created the home market, Capital Volume 1. In their return, the impoverishment and ruin of the rural population play a part in the creation for capital or a reserve army of labor. In every capitalist country, part of the agricultural population is therefore constantly on the point of passing over into an urban or manufacturing, such that non-agricultural proletariat. This source of relative surplus population is thus constantly flowing. The agricultural laborer is therefore reduced to the minimum of wages and always stands with one foot already in the swamp of pauperism. Capital Volume 1. The peasant's private ownership of the land he tills is the foundation of small-scale production and the condition for its prospering and achieving the classical form. But such small-scale production is compatible only with a narrow and primitive framework of production and society. Under capitalism, the exploitation of the peasant differs only in form from the exploitation of the industrial proletariat. The exploiter is the same, capital. The individual capitalists exploit the individual peasant through mortgages and usury. The capitalist class exploits the peasant class through the state taxes. Refer the class struggle in France. The small holding of the peasant is now only the pretext that allows the capitalist to draw profits, interest, and rent from the soil, while leaving it to the tiller of the soil himself to see how he can extract his wages. Refer the 18th Brumaire. As a result, the peasant cedes to the capitalist society, such that to the capitalist class, even even a part of the wages, sinking to the level of the Irish tenant farmer under the pretense of being a private proprietor. See the class struggle in France. What is one of the reasons why grain prices are lower in countries with predominant small peasant land proprietorship than in countries with capitalist mode of production? Capital Volume 3. It is that the peasant hands over gratis to the society such that the capitalist class a part of his surplus product. This lower price such that of grain and other agricultural produce is consequently a result of the producer's poverty and by no means of their labor productivity. Capital Volume 3. Under capitalism, the small holding system, which is the normal form of small scale production, degenerates, collapses, and perishes. Proprietorship of land parcels, by its very nature, excludes the development of social productive forces of labor, social forms of labor, social concentration of capital, large-scale cattle raising, and the progressive application of science. Usury and a taxation system must impoverish it everywhere. The expenditure of capital in the price of the land withdraws this capital from cultivation. An infinite fragmentation of means of production and isolation of the producers themselves. Cooperative societies such that associations of small peasants, while playing an extremely progressive bourgeoisie role, only weakens this tendency without eliminating it. Nor must it be forgotten that these cooperative societies do much for the well-to-do peasants and very little, next to nothing, for the mass of poor peasants. Then the associations themselves become exploiters of hired labor. Monstrous waste of human energy, progressive deterioration of conditions of production and increased prices of means of production, an inevitable law of proprietorship of parcels. Capital Volume 3. In agriculture, as in industry, capitalism transforms the process of production only at the price of the martyrdom of the producer. The dispersion of the rural laborers over large areas breaks their power of resistance, while concentration increases that of the town operatives. In modern agriculture, as in the urban industries, the increased productiveness and quantity of the labor set in motion are bought at the cost of laying waste and consuming by disease labor power itself. Moreover, all progress in capitalistic agriculture is a progress in the art not only of robbing the laborer but of robbing the soil. Capitalist production, therefore, develops technology and combining together of various processes into a social whole only by sapping the original source of all wealth, the soil and the laborer. Capital Volume 3. Okay, we have another few minutes left. So how do we go about, Kamran? So
maybe any comments or questions? I think this part is talking about agriculture. There are many complex issues, starting from ground rent and to how the small producers are struggling and how they are expropriated. And then we go into how capitalist agriculture robs the vitality of the land, the soil, and the labor force. I think we should discuss in detail. Next week we can do that. And another note I want to add, the ground rent theory, Marxist ground rent theory, not only applies to agriculture land, it also applies to other natural resources. For example, in that part, Marx talks whether either in agriculture or mining. He talks about mining. We have natural resources which are held privately in private property. So they can command rent. So we need to, it's a major issue taken up by 19th century economists. And even today, it's a major issue. A huge part of surplus value goes as rent. Rent for natural resources Even we know the 2G spectrum and all. So there are rent elements. So using that monopoly, they can get more surplus value, more profit from the market. How that operates. The study of ground rent theory is very important. And some people have applied that theory for monopoly profit. Today in 20th century, we have huge monopolies. They make excess profit over this average profit. How that operates. So maybe we should discuss into some detail. We may not be able to go into all the details, I guess.
Okay.
That's what I want to know, Adarkar.
Yeah, I think, since it's a new area which we are getting into, probably we'll take up this entire part, explaining this entire part in the next session. If anybody has any questions on the previously studied topics, you can ask. Before that, I have one question. Comrade, can you explain this marginal utility? I mean, I didn't fully understand.
Okay. So there is something called utility. I will understand from what I study. I read. There is one popular economics book for the graduate course. The beginners course by Paul Samuelson. So we used to read in the 90s. So they all start from this production function and the marginal utility. They will look at individual. There's a study of the economics is divided into microeconomics and macroeconomics. Macroeconomics, we look at GDP, inflation, how the central bank regulates the interest rate, all those things will come. In microeconomics, they will look into how the individual family maximizes their economic value. Okay, and also the individual firm. So it's a theory, study of behavior of firms and behavior of individual family. So this marginal utility theory, there is something called utility. Let's say I'll take only one aspect. There are many things, as you can understand. It's 150 years of these fellows studying, and they are splitting, and they are doing a lot of studies. There are behavioral economics and all those things. I will take one small example. Let's say I have a monthly income of 20,000 rupees. So with this 20,000 rupees, I can buy a basket of goods and services. How will I decide? So the marginal utility theory tells us that I will try to maximize my utility, and the total utility from all the goods and services I procure using this 20,000 rupees should be maximum. I will try to maximize. How will I maximize? Each product, how much I will buy? I will like when I start with, let's say I'm buying. Let's say I'm going to eat in a restaurant. Okay, this is one of the services I purchase with my money. How much I will eat? Let's say I eat 4 idlis. 4 idlis when I am hungry, 4 idlis, and the utility of 4 idlis is very high. I will eat 4 idlis. Will I eat 6 idlis? It costs the same money. Okay, maybe I will eat. What about 10 idlis? So then the utility start going down from first idli to second idli to the sixth idli. And at some stage, it becomes negative also. So where do I stop? Where I will stop is, I will try to, the marginal utility from the last unit, I will equate with the price. For 5 rupees, it looks a little absurd. Maybe I didn't understand properly, but whatever I study, it's really absurd. Nobody can behave like that. So how many idlis I eat is decided by if the idli costs me 5 rupees. So the utility of last idli should be equal to the utility of the last unit of other goods I purchase. I not only eat, I also buy clothes. Probably I go and buy a shirt, 500 rupees. Do I buy one shirt or 2 shirts? So I will look at the price, and I will try to equate to the marginal utility. So I will stop at the marginal utility. So when I go through this process of equating marginal utility to the last unit I consume, I maximize the total utility of all my consumption. This is roughly the theory of utility. And I think even like Lenin says, it's a vulgar economy to the core. There's no scientific basis. You cannot measure. It's psychological, subjective, and from this there is no. And then it goes into macroeconomics, which will talk about how the government is managing economy and all. This is what I could share.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, comrade. I think now the time is 9. So we'll end here regarding this ground rent which we discussed, which we read. We'll discuss it in the upcoming session. So thanks everyone.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.